and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described
pandemic BS, yeah.
this economic plan as something
Trump
that
knows what's good for him. He should stop talking about it.
By the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say, look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top
Better stay on that mute mic, buddy.
My plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences. Like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She
Run,
doesn't have a
spot,
plan.
run. All right.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce.
Gotta hand it to her.
So
She's
that
well
we don't end
practiced.
up having
She isn't speaking like a clown like she usually is.
In terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point. When we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans.
Trump is getting better at staying on point. Yes, he is.
For a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that.
He just said that he's for that.
And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Look at
Thank
this
you, Vice
2025
President Harris.
Well,
fantasy.
there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely
This is
can
such
afford
fringe
to
stuff.
do it, and
Why-
what you
why
are
is
putting
this-
her through is unconscionable.
The economy's falling apart.
And the people
World War
of America
III.
have not. The majority
How did
of Americans
IVF become
believe
such
in
a big
woman's
thing?
right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why, in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we
I
want to
think
do
we're
with
going
the
to
baby.
go point for Trump on this one.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country.
She
Vice
spoke
President
for 3 minutes
Harris,
and said
you were
nothing.
tasked
Yeah,
by
it's,
President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the traffic. United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first.
Here comes Kamala.
And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as
they're eating the cats, that one's going to go around the world.
They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase: make America great again.
Oh, what happened? What happened? Oops.
On steroid.
ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
People are
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll
Hey,
let you respond
Sobos,
to the
what's
rest
up?
of what you've heard.
Both suck. Things don't
Talk
get better
about
from here, but it's
extreme.
entirely likely people go back to sleep. Yeah, well.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the
I've seen a lot to get
endorsement
excited about here.
of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the
It's,
endorsement of former Vice President
gonna
Dick
be
Cheney
far
and
more war if
Congressmember
she gets
Liz
in.
Cheney.
That's for sure.
And if you want to really know the inside track on who the
ABC is a
former
lot
president
louder.
is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive
Can't speak
another
truth on the internet,
Trump
yeah.
term.
Some
And
places.
when we listen to this kind of rhetoric,
Not YouTube.
when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people.
Yeah, there we go.
Who's were just killed, viciously and violently
Good,
killed.
good.
And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof.
Latency is
and we have a
crazy.
new
Some
form
people,
of crime.
yeah.
It's called
Some
migrant
nights it's,
crime. And it's happening at levels
you
that
can get
nobody
10,
thought
15
possible.
seconds
President Trump,
sometimes.
as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually potentially coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank
She'll
you.
become very dramatic here,
Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta
She may
and Fani
cry.
Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies.
This terminate the Constitution thing.
Someone who has openly expressed
Sobo says,
disdain
when I moved into my place
for
3 years ago,
members of our
crime rate was
military.
250% the average, and now it's 150%. Now, that could be a lot more crime, or just localized enforcement. It's complicated. Could be you, Sobos. Maybe they didn't want to mess with you.
It's up to the American people.
Yeah, I mean,
Vice
crime
President.
is
Thank you.
largely a
Vice
local
President
phenomenon,
Harris, in your
except
last
for
run for president.
when you've got wild
This is
immigration
the
of
one that weaponized,
criminals
not
running
me.
fentanyl
She
gangs and
weaponized.
stuff like
I
that.
probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that
to get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why
She's
have
never
so
been
many
elected
of
for
your
anything.
policy
Yeah.
positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every
Is
one of
it-
the, at least every point that you've made.
Its
But in particular, let's
erection,
talk
yeah.
about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having
I'll have to make a supercut of his facial expressions.
Assaulted by her stepfather.
Facial expressions. Facial expressions.
On protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up
facial expressions of
and not beating people down. And name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was.
You think anybody's winning?
A Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies.
Dude is off his rocker?
She was big on
you think
defund
so?
the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Oh.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down
that's right. Okay, coming back to you, eh?
Money to get them out of jail. She did things
you might have come over from Viva Fry's
she wants to do
channel.
Transgender operations on
Thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you back.
This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil
we've been
business
spreading
going
it for a
like
while,
nobody has
for
ever
real.
done before. They took
Couple years
they took
now.
over. They got rid of it. Started
On our way
getting
to
rid of
3
it,
years.
and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times
thanks,
higher.
Silvos. We
Because
try.
You're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was.
YouTube,
because they had no choice, because
thanks
the
to all you
prices
guys
of
for the
energy
subs,
were-
but YouTube
were
still wouldn't let us
quadrupling and
monetize
doubling.
because
You
we
saw
had
what happened to gasoline.
dangerous
So they said, let's
content.
go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back
you
to
know,
destroying our
it's,
country. And oil
it's
will
weird,
be
love
dead,
to stunt.
Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back
How
to
do we feel
windmills,
from
and we'll go
Canada
back
watching
to
this shit show
solar,
down here?
Where they need a whole
I mean,
desert
probably
to
feels
get some
quite similar
energy
if-
to come out of. You ever see
I don't
a
know how
solar
much
plant? By the
information
way,
you get
I'm a
on
big fan of
Canada,
solar.
but it's a
But they take
shit show up here too, so.
400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have
It's
an
just
election
that
in just 56 days.
as goes America,
I
so
wanna
goes
talk
the
about
world,
The peaceful
so
transfer of power,
it's a lot
which,
heavier
of course, we
what
all
happens
know is
in
a
the States.
cornerstone of our democracy and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol.
conspiracy
You
of
said you would
silence.
be
That was
right there with
crazy.
them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing
Silvos,
say
we
you
are
watched it
on
unfold
Rumble.
on
We're
television
streaming on
off the
Rumble
Oval
right
Office.
now.
You did send out tweets, but it was more than
Just
2 hours
super
before you
spreader is
sent out
one
that
word,
video
or
message,
super?
telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret
Rumble's
about
search
what you
isn't
did
as
on
good
that
as
day?
YouTube's, so
You just said
I'll put a QR
thing
code
that
up.
Isn't covered peacefully and patriotically. I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer. that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
Love to stunt. If I was here, who would I vote for?
You were the president.
It would have been RFK.
It's a very simple question as we move forward.
Now it would be Trump.
Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
I don't see any reason to vote for Kamala.
Yes,
I had nothing to do with that, other than they asked me to make a speech.
Trump.
I showed up for a speech.
She's
I said,
done
I
nothing.
think
She's never been
I went to Nancy
in office.
Pelosi,
She wasn't
the
even
mayor of Washington, D.C.,
voted for this.
and
It's
the mayor
insane
put it back
that
in
she's the
writing, as you
candidate.
know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others.
I'm getting a QR code ready to put up so you can find our channel on Rumble.
National Guard or soldiers. They
The
rejected
locals
me.
one is
Nancy
up there. That
Pelosi
should lead you
rejected
to
me.
Rumble
It
as
was
well.
just 2 weeks ago, her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible.
Yeah, we got a TikTok.
She didn't do
Just
her
put it
job.
up.
The question was about you.
About
as
a
president,
year ago,
not
I
about
tried
former
on
Speaker
TikTok.
Pelosi,
We
but I
lasted
do
for
want
11
Vice President
days.
Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob
Instagram link doesn't work? Okay.
our nation's capital.
See what happened there.
To desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
Love to stunt. All right.
And understand.
Thanks. Really appreciate the follow.
Former president
It's
has
great
been
to see some new
indicted
faces.
and impeached.
Great to see people on
for
Kick. I'd like
exactly
to
that
engage
reason.
on Kick. We stream every
But
time to
this is
Kick,
not an
but
isolated
it takes a long time
situation.
to build an audience.
Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president
Proud
said,
Boys
stand
are a
back and
militia?
stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what
it's a
January
militia?
6th was, I say
They're just
we don't have to
inventing
go
stuff.
back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place
Rumble looks
in
better?
our
Wow.
campaign
All
for
right.
you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath.
Democrats advocated
If
for
this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
invalidating the election when Trump was
Let's
elected.
turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that
There.
story
Sorry
has
that
been,
took
as
so
you would
long.
say, debunked.
That's the
Laura
Rumble
Ingraham,
QR code up there.
Sean
It takes you
Hannity,
to a video on our
Jesse,
channel.
All of these people, they covered it.
Our
If they
latest
go
cover
an
song
extra
of War
sentence,
Pigs.
They will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this.
How do you
talk
know
about
you don't live
the
here?
Capitol. Why are we
Well,
allowing
we
these
get called the
millions of people
51st
to
state
come
all the
through on
time, so maybe I
southern
do.
border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now.
Recktenwald?
I'd like to see her
Who's
go
that? Is that
down
libertarian?
to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to
So bad, this kind of caught me by surprise.
Go down to Washington, D.C.
I'm
and let her sign a bill
deep into editing a couple films, and I let it get away from me today, and I totally forgot about this. Totally should have had bingo and a drinking game.
Wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, "Come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill." If he
I don't like Trump, but I won't pretend they didn't steal the election blatantly.
Yeah, right. Patrol, who are phenomenal.
Fishiest election I've ever seen, that's for sure. We were watching that late into the morning, and it was just bizarre.
Here tonight, I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus: truth in these
turning the
times that we're
page
living
and
in.
progressing
Mr.
forward,
President, for 3.5 years
as opposed to
after
progressing
you lost
backwards.
the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, "You lost by a
Recktenwald
whisker,
won 5 out of 6 in the primary rounds. The last round, somehow a child molester won. Okay, right. I think I heard about that.
You lost in 2020.
I don't acknowledge that at all.
Well, I mean, they can't have the Libertarian Party growing down there. We've got the same thing in Canada with the People's Party of Canada.
There's so much proof.
And they just ignore him, even though he's bigger than the fourth party.
I got almost 75 million
Green
votes,
Party.
the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need 2 things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad.
Paper and pencil. Paper and pencil only. No more computers at all.
They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
Yeah, I saw him speak at that big conference that Tim Pool was at. Sounded great. Sounded really great.
Didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of
my main
judges,
thing is
no judge looked at it.
Is war. Can't be involved with these stupid CIA wars anymore.
Technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker, so he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, "When I win, those people who cheated," and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, "We won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote." Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States.
No more effing wars, indeed, Moniker.
Attempts, as he did in
no
the
more
past,
foreign aid.
to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that
stop giving places money to not make nukes. Yeah, let's just stay out of country's business and talk to them and be diplomatic.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you.
As boorish as Trump can seem sometimes, he did more talking, diplomacy, and peace deals around the world than the last 4 presidents combined.
Court cases you have lost.
He just wants everybody to be rich.
Did, in fact, lose that election.
It's like, why should we fight?
One to believe
let's talk.
That perhaps
North Korea,
we do not have in the candidate
truly
to
inspiring
my right,
stuff.
the temperament.
Even though he can be a real rough package.
Ability to not be confused.
Foreign leaders seem to like him.
That's deeply troubling, and the American
81 million
people
votes,
deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men. They call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians.
Man, not seeing any slam dunks,
now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead.
I'm just worried about our rights. He's willing to negotiate things we should not negotiate.
Prime Minister Benjamin
like what?
Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been
Hey,
able to
engineer,
break
have you
through the
looked into the MH370 research by Ashton Forbes?
Let's
I'm not
understand how we
familiar
got
with the
here.
name Ashton
On
Forbes.
October 7,
I've tried to stay pretty
Hamas,
up on the 370
a terrorist
stuff.
organization,
Is it a new angle?
slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert.
Bump
Women
stock,
were
death penalty for
horribly
drug
raped.
dealers. The Rush
And so
vaccine was a
absolutely,
good business
I said
deal.
then, I say
Yeah.
now, Israel has a right to defend itself.
Well, I think they knew what they were doing with Trump, right? It
And
played
how it
into
does
his
so
vanity. I'm going to
matters.
save the world.
Because it is also true, far too many
No one's
innocent
seen such a
Palestinians
good
have been
vaccine.
killed.
Experts everywhere say
Children,
it's the
mothers.
best vaccine ever, you
What
know,
we
and
know
he thinks
is
he's
that
saving the universe,
this
and
war
he still
must
does.
end.
So,
It
yeah,
must win,
you know, that's a
end
big
immediately,
blemish on his
and
record.
The way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal, and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that
also have to
solution,
remain
there must
realistic.
be
I mean, we
security for the
vote for
Israeli
ideological
people and
reasons,
Israel,
but
and an
once
equal measure for the
they're in
Palestinians.
power,
But the one thing I will assure you
there
always,
do have to be
I will always
compromises,
give
right?
Israel
So,
the
I mean,
ability to defend itself, in
real
particular
politic, right?
as it relates to Iran.
But we do
and
have to
any
have our
threat
lines
that
in the
Iran
sand
and
that
its
we have to
proxies
protect.
pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly
She
deserve.
touched on 0 votes and somehow didn't
President
mention
Trump,
she's
how
actually
would
never
you
been elected to
negotiate
anything.
with
Yeah,
Netanyahu
yeah, I don't know.
and also Hamas
Gotta see some
in order
home
to get
runs
the
here on these
hostages
points.
out and prevent the killing
Trump's
of more
calm
innocent
but
civilians in
rambling a
Gaza.
bit.
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well.
There's a well-researched and
Never,
cited
there was no threat of it
hypothesis
either,
dealing
by the
with
way, for 4 years.
space-time manipulation.
Have gone into Ukraine
I have
and
heard
killed
the
millions
meme
of
of that.
people when you
I
add
haven't
it up,
looked into
and
it
far worse than
specifically,
people
though.
understand
Why,
what's
do you think
going
it's
on over
real?
there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party.
Yeah, the whole thing's crazy,
She
right?
hates Israel.
My mind is open.
If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been
I think
pretty
you
good
can
at
put links in
predictions,
our
and I hope
YouTube
I'm
chat.
wrong
Put a
about
link
that
to
one. She hates
a
Israel.
doc on it
At
or
the
an
same
article.
time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around.
Okay, cool.
Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people.
A democracy is being a sheep at a table of wolves voting on dinner plans.
And
a republic is a well-armed sheep contesting the vote.
It is very well known.
Very quotable.
That Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear.
Yes,
they can manipulate
you can take this point
with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant true. Because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
What are they doing, ads?
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Holy shit! They've already got fact checks up. Well, this seems fair. Mom who pushed California mother advocated for stricter DUI laws after 2 of her children were killed. What? Wait, what was that? Holy shit, this is all just anti-Trump stuff in the break. Holy shit, they're not even trying. Dictator on day one, bingo spot filled. All right, let's go. We're pulling for you. I hope for a full bingo. Thank you. We have lots of issues to get to. Have you or a loved one been injured by Moderna? It costs the soul of a nation, Solos. That's how much it costs. Hope that wasn't copyrighted music. Should have muted it. There. That's better. Let's watch something more entertaining.
د زمری سلروشتمه د افغانستان د تاریخ لزرینو بابونو څخه ده چې په دې ورځ د افغانستان د مجاهد ملت مبارزو قربانیو سرښندنو رنګ راوړ.
This I don't get, how Americans could vote for them after this Afghanistan thing.
دې عمل هم مهمه ده چې راتلونکي نسلونه ترې د ازادۍ، استقلال او خپلواکۍ درسونه زده کړي.
Then they put the men's soccer team score up to make their false claims seem normal and matter of fact. Yeah. They started in with like 3 anti-Trump stories in a row. Like you're supposed to believe that this is an impartial debate. Is your tampon killing you? Oh, fucking American trucks and planes and guns. What a mess. Alright, the assholes are back. One sec here.
Let's go back to the debate live in Philadelphia.
Live from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it.
Good point.
That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify,
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives
good.
being destroyed.
It's a bit of
I want to take
principle.
this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up.
Putin being angry about NATO moving into Ukraine is like a guy invading the house next door because they have too many guns. Really? You think so?
A few days
really think
before
that?
Russia invaded,
Like Putin's being silly?
through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared
Elijah
with him
White,
American
welcome on
intelligence
YouTube.
about how he could defend
Trump
himself.
2024, all right,
Days
bud.
later, I went to NATO's eastern
How do you think he's
flank,
doing tonight?
to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies
Putin would be sitting in Kiev if his objective was to take over the Ukraine.
And that we
It's not you stopping him,
the importance of
Kamala.
the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise,
I think
Putin
it's
would be
best
sitting
a
in
stupid
Kyiv
excuse
with his
like all the
eyes on
rest of them, but the rest can be
Europe,
factually
starting
disproven
with Poland.
so.
And why don't you tell the
Invading was
800,000
stupid, yeah.
Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania
Well,
how quickly you would give up for the sake of
I made a number of
favor
films that deal
and what
with
you
this
think is a
topic, and
friendship with
when you
what
look
is
at
known
it
to be a dictator
from the
who
Russian
would eat
side
you
over the
for
last
lunch.
25 years,
Vice President
very,
Harris, thank
very
you. We've heard
different
from
look.
both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan
Perhaps you
came up
haven't
in the
looked into
last
that
hour.
side enough.
I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now.
I like
eventually,
his
he's
quiet.
got a thing that other people don't have.
His
He's
whole
got
quiet
nuclear
thing
weapons.
tonight.
They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about.
Putin's objective
Nobody likes
was
talk
to
about it. But just so you
halt
understand,
the
they sent her to
NATOification
negotiate peace before this war started.
of the Ukraine,
3 days
to have the
later,
like one of
he
the
went
last
in and he started
barriers
the war because everything they
to
said was
NATO,
weak and
have it right
stupid.
up on his
They
doorstep.
said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She
The
was
activities
emissary.
going on in
They sent
Ukraine
her in to
are increasingly
negotiate
becoming
with
anti-Russian,
Zelensky and
including the
Putin,
killing of over
and she
10,000
did.
civilians in the Donbass.
So
that's the second objective, is secure the Donbass and give them a way to get out of Ukraine, which he did. Militarily, the only objective has been to secure the Donbass.
She is a horrible
That's why he's never bombed Kiev, he's never marched on Kiev, he hasn't tried to take over Ukraine, which is
You
the
did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin.
dishonest,
Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir
disingenuous,
Putin?
that was the word I was looking for.
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate. You're going to hear
Way
a bunch
that
of lies
it's
coming from
put,
this
that he just
fellow.
went nuts and he
that
took
is
over the
another one.
Ukraine. It's
When I went
ridiculous.
to
If you want to
meet
take it
with
over, you
President
take it
Zelensky, I've
over.
now met with him over 5 times. The reality is, it
Now,
has been about standing
He's
as
still
America
fighting because
always
Ukraine's still
should.
fighting with the
As a
billions and
leader,
billions and billions.
upholding
We're sending them
international
in
rules
military
and norms.
equipment.
As a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very
I don't need to
much what is
obfuscate
at
a simple
stake here.
thing.
The
It
President of
matters
the
who hits
United
first,
States
not who
is
hits harder. Look at
Commander-in-Chief.
Pearl Harbor.
And
Yeah,
the
but I mean,
American
it's
people
not.
have a right to rely
It's different.
on a president who understands the significance
Because
of
hitting
America's
first was
role and
killing
responsibility
Russians in the Donbass.
in terms of ensuring
You know,
that there is
letting the
stability
CIA
and
take
ensuring
hold
we
of Ukraine.
stand up for our principles
Americans
and not
having a
sell
coup
them
d'état
for the benefit
Ukraine.
of personal flattery.
You know,
We've talked about
I mean,
Ukraine
all this
and
stuff,
Vladimir
and then
Putin. I do want to talk
openly
about Afghanistan.
discussing
It came
NATO's
up in the first hour of this
Ukraine's
debate.
participation in
I
NATO.
want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European
I know he had the
nations,
Crimea
both on
action under
trade and on
Obama.
NATO. I
Yeah,
got them to
Crimea,
pay up
parts
by
of
saying
Donetsk
one of the
and stuff.
statements you made before.
Yeah.
If you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers
Slaughter
who
and
died
Dog
in the
Pass
chaotic
during
withdrawal from
Obama
Afghanistan. I
and
do
up
want to ask the
to
Vice President,
right up to
do you
2022
believe
is
you
just
bear
getting
any
worse.
responsibility in the way
Azov
that
Battalion
withdrawal
was in
played out?
there, literally
Well, I will
shelling
tell you,
cities.
I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said
There's
they
no
would,
good war and there's
Joe
no
Biden
bad
did.
peace. Yeah, well said,
And as a
Monica.
result, America's taxpayers are not paying
Either
the
way,
$300 million
Sobos, I
a
know
day
you're
we were
entitled to
paying
your
for that
opinions and I'm
endless
entitled to
war.
mine.
And
Thing is,
as of today,
it's
there
their
is not
war.
one
It's
member
not
of the
Canada's.
United States military.
It's not
who is in
America's. Well, it is
active
America's
duty
war.
in a combat
Just not-
zone in any war
just not
zone
actually
around
fighting
the
it.
world
They're
the
using
first
a
time this
proxy.
century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government.
Did you
He
watch it streamed by
negotiated
the?
directly
So
with a
this stuff
terrorist
is
organization
well
called the
documented if you
Taliban.
go outside
The
of
negotiation
the
involved
mainstream
Taliban
media,
getting
who were reporting on
5,000
this
terrorists,
until there was like a
Taliban
cutoff in like
terrorists released. And get this,
2019-ish.
you'll get this.
They're reporting on how
And
horribly
the
things were going in the
president at the
Ukraine
time
and what the
invited
Azov
the
battalions
Taliban
were
to
doing
Camp
and the money
David,
laundering
a
and
place
all this
of
stuff and the
storied
killing of innocent
significance
people,
for us as
all
Americans,
being
a place
reported
where
on.
we
You can go
honor
find it
the
if you're not
importance of
willing to look
American
at it.
diplomacy, where we
Then I mean,
invite
you know,
and
it's fine.
receive
You can have your opinion, man. It's
respected
certainly not
world
an unpopular
leaders.
opinion.
And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be Commander-in-Chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris,
Yeah, and there you go.
President
China
Trump's
again.
response to her saying
And just
we
look at
began
what the Democrats have done since they've gotten in
So,
power. Sent
if you
Nancy
take a look at that
Pelosi over
period
to
of time,
Taiwan, openly make
the
fun
Taliban was
of
killing
President
our
Xi.
soldiers,
It's just
a lot of them with
going straight
snipers.
to war if the Democrats
And I
get
got
in.
involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved, and Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems.
Abdul, don't do
Why
it.
do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal. And
Agreed. I, as an American, hate these perennial wars, these empire-building actions. Yeah, I know.
That's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump,
yes,
thank
Patrick
you.
Lancaster, he's
I
great.
want to move on now to race and politics.
He's
in this
excellent.
country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to
ROC
turn
is the
black,
rightful
and now she
government
wants
of
to be
the
known as
mainland."
black." I want to ask a bigger
Oh,
picture question
Sovos.
here tonight.
You got to
Why
come
do you
back
believe
for
it's
it. You got to watch some of the
appropriate to
videos
weigh in on the racial
that we've
identity
made.
of
We
your
go deep
opponent?
dives in
And I
history
don't
on
care.
this stuff. I mean,
I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out.
CCP,
And
the communist dictator,
I'll
they've
say
invaded
that,
way
and
more
then
places than
I read
Putin.
that she was black.
Like where?
And that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to
Where's
her.
China
That's up to
invaded?
her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
They genocide
it's-
openly. Show me an
honestly, I
open
think it's
genocide
a
that
tragedy
they've committed.
that we have someone who wants
Geez,
to be
Sovos,
president
you got
who
some.
has
You got to start looking at things
consistently,
from the
over
other
course of his
side of
career,
history, not just what
attempted to
you're
use race to
told,
divide
by
the American
the
people.
usual sources.
You know,
This
I
is
do believe that the vast
I'm worried
majority
about you,
of us
man.
know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember
especially by race.
how Donald Trump started.
That's
He
all
was
you guys talk about.
a
What we did in Central
land, he
North
owned
America
land,
for
he
fucking
owned
bananas
buildings,
is criminal. Yeah.
And he was
Totally.
investigated because he refused to rent.
Smedley
property
Butler
to
is
black
Smedley
families.
Butler is a good source
Let's remember,
for
this is the
for
same
that time.
individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States.
Yeah, it'd be nice if Ukraine
And I
could
think
buy
the
their
American
weapons. That'd be
people
nice.
Want better than that. Want better than this.
No, the Uyghurs. Yeah,
Want
here we go.
someone
So
who understands as I do. I travel our country.
you'll have to come back for another stream. We can really discuss
We see in
this.
each other a
'Cause I'm
friend. We see in each
I'm trying to
other a
only talk
neighbor.
over Kamala.
We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have
The Uyghur
Americans
story
point
is
their
that's
fingers
all
at each other.
just invented
I meet
by
with people all
George
the
Soros-backed
time who tell
NGO
me,
groups.
Can we please
There's actually
just have
no
discourse
evidence of it
about
whatsoever.
how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people.
Hey, look, I'm being nice,
Knowing that
Sobos.
regardless
You think something's
of
wrong with me?
people's
Then
color or
go
the
watch something
language
else.
their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country.
Oh, and then we're
There's
gonna try
never been
Falun
anything like
Gong.
it.
Yeah,
They're
it's,
destroying our country, and they come up with things like what
That's
she just
cool,
said.
man. I know the
Going back
standard
many,
line on
many
them.
years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest.
I'm sorry if it sounds like that to you, Sovos. I didn't say that.
Build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy.
That's in your head, man. I didn't say anything like that.
Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this. She is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman.
I got the links.
She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had. A horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad.
Mr.
And she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly.
Elijah, we need Trump.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden.
I think you're very similar to up here. You definitely don't
and
need
what I do
former
offer
years
is a
of
new generation of leadership for our country.
liberal bonkers down there.
One who believes in what is
gonna
possible.
be a war.
One who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life.
You keep recommending I participate in a struggle session if I don't agree with you? That's sad as fuck.
I have a plan.
What are you talking about?
Allowing people
You're starting to look like a nut job, Sovos.
What has been fleeting in terms of the American dream.
We're having a nice little debate there, and you keep going personal, and you keep saying I said things that I didn't say. Starting to get a little annoying.
First-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
Thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she has
we do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay,
that's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no,
something twice that I need to respond
No,
to.
I'm sorry. We're going to move on, Vice President Harris. President Trump, this is now your third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare.
When you say go watch my documentaries, that's telling me to do a struggle session. What are you even talking about?
So tonight,
it's telling you to go watch my
documentaries
documentaries because we're watching the Trump debate right now.
What it is.
Obamacare
We can't
was
break
lousy
every
healthcare.
geopolitical
Always
thing that you
was.
bring up.
It's not very
We can't
good
talk
today.
about that all night.
And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things.
Be
we're
happy
gonna
to do
it,
another
and we're
show
gonna
where we
replace it.
go
But
through this,
Remember
but
this. I inherited
we're gonna talk over the whole
Obamacare
debate.
because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote
Struggle
for it.
session,
They were
my
unanimous.
ass.
They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be? Never going to be great. Or do I
You got
let
3
it
bingos
rot?
now?
And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain,
she talks like she's fed through an earpiece.
Walked onto the
She shouldn't be unless they,
no, you
unless
don't.
they snuck around the rules.
No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People
please like and subscribe. Yeah, good idea, man.
That have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance,
Monica,
or
you're just happy because you're getting your bingo card filled up.
Anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go.
Exactly.
We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain.
Where are they getting these figures from? I mean, we all can see that the economy was better under Trump.
In American
for America,
products,
they had
American automobiles. It
bigger oil production. Where do they get these stats?
What we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Let's see if they hit us with the anti-Trump fact checks right away like they did last time. Yeah, there we go. Now, I gotta say, just gonna mute that. I gotta say, I did cringe when he said that because, I mean, I saw all those reports coming in about. It's kind of like the people shitting everywhere all of a sudden, and then now all of a sudden, they're eating dogs and stuff. All right, so Sovos, I'm going to direct you to a site here. Just let me get this set up. We're not cool enough to have some kid running my broadcasting software yet, so it takes me a sec to get things here. There, so this is CanadianPatriot.org. This is a site run by two historians that I work with. You can see here on the side there are all these thumbnails for films. Those are the films that I direct. And I, too, thought exactly the same things that you thought until I got in touch with people that actually did more deeper factual looks into history and actually also, worked with and talked with people who actually are historians in those countries as well. Russia, China, Iran, these kind of things. If you can handle the idea of reading something that counters these narratives without it automatically going to some kind of grand endorsement of communism in China or whatever the hell else he said, Che Guevara and other things, if you can handle looking at some alternative information, there is plenty out there. Falun Gong, I saw you put a URL for. Uyghur genocide, all this kind of stuff. These people take this apart in very, very simple fashion. This one's got a podcast, but they've got tons of articles that go over this stuff. How do you spell it again? Boy, it's always hard to spell. Lots of articles that touch on this stuff. They've written books on these topics. And I've been there, bro. It was really hard to break through at first to find out that these things that you're being told you need to take for granted are, in fact, pretty much ops all the way across the board. So, so there you go, man. I mean, I have done streams where we're very specifically discussing these things. We had a Ukrainian girl on during the Freedom Convoy explaining the alternative angle to what was really happening in Russia, and I was completely ignorant of I didn't know any of the background. I caught some of the stories about the Maidan and that kind of stuff. But I didn't know too much back then, but immediately started to, perhaps I was lucky that I started to hear dissenting voices. And, I just highly recommend that you do as well. And if that's a struggle session for you, then, then you're going to think what you think forever. Because, if you consider it a struggle session, to just go read some other articles or look at some other sources of information, then you're never going to change your mind. You're never going to learn other points of view either. So highly recommend that. And, let's keep it cool, man. Obviously you're cool. You're on our show. So obviously you're a dude. So let's just keep it that way. Let me get back to the NBC bullshit. Wonder what they're lying about now. But yeah, I really wish I'd remembered about the debate today. I should have put it on my calendar because I just furiously trying to get this voiceover edited for the film I'm working on. I totally forgot. I may switch from beer to rum. I smell debate shenanigans. Let's roll the clip. Have you... Is it just a Kamala bingo, or is it both Trump and Kamala bingo? Holy cow, real documentaries. I thought you just did catchy jingles for TV commercials. I wish. I'd like to have that on the side. TV pays pretty good. All right, we are back with the bullshit.
We begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very
I was so fucking proud of you guys during the convoy. Texas feels your pain.
One that is focused on the
Thanks,
future.
Monitor. Moniker.
And the other that is focused on the past.
We were proud right back.
And an
All
attempt
you guys
to take
that
us backward.
Kept showing up in the chat and supporting us.
But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American
but
people
we all
know
look at
we all
Texas
have so
with
much
jealousy.
more in
You
common
guys
than
have
what separates
managed
us.
to keep your
And
shit
we
together.
can chart a new
You might
way
lose
forward.
Austin, though.
And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do.
Gotta say, she's speaking well.
Giving
You're not doing the shit
folks
show
a
with the
break and
laughing
bringing down
and
the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together.
I mean, it's
that is
memorized,
about
but,
sustaining
it's
America's
politics. Kind of
standing
expect
in the
that.
world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be
Boston sucks so bad, yeah, eh? When I drive to Oklahoma, I avoid any town larger than 10,000 people.
10 and 20 years
Sounds like smart thinking, man. It's whenever you get these big towns, man. They lose their minds after a while.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years.
Good.
They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News.
Yeah, he had,
good night.
At least they let him end on a high note. That was good.
And welcome back to NBC News coverage of the debate. Pick your adjective. I would go with fiery to begin, but it goes from there. Both the candidates, you could argue, executing on their strategy going in. For Kamala Harris, that was to get under the former president's skin, which she did quite often. For
You should
the
frame it,
former
who do you want to
president,
lead during
his
wartime,
option was,
her
of
or
course,
me?
to
That
go
would have been a
after,
good line.
The economy after
Agreed.
Afghanistan, the
I don't know. What do you
administration's
think?
position on the withdrawal.
Was that a win
Afghanistan.
tonight for Trump?
And
Was it a
immigration,
win
of
for
course.
Kamala? I think
This is exactly what they wanted.
I think it
The
was
question
kind of
is
like,
how they got there and
either
along
way.
the
I think so. I think
People are going to be
the
talking about this debate
Democrats
for a
are
long
going to
time. And
be
is
cheering
this the
tomorrow.
final debate? Is this the only one we're going to see? Will there be another? Well, it depends on how each candidate feels they did tonight. Let's bring back our moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson. Boy, do we have a lot to chew over here.
Yeah, oh boy, I'm sure you do.
It does seem
Well,
that Kamala Harris was trying to hit
I wish
every
that I
trigger
had.
point.
Yeah, shut up. Yeah, too bad I hadn't thought of this earlier. Could have got the stream going much earlier. Picked up a few more viewers. It was a little bit slow tonight. Everybody's watching it somewhere else. I only found out because my YouTube showed that Crowder had the stream going, and I was like, oh crap. So I'm so glad you guys showed up. Excellent talk. Gonna lead out with our War Pigs video cover song. That's taking our Canadian leaders to task for supporting Ukraine in the war. Yeah, it won't change anyone's votes, but it may dissuade them from taking time to vote. Yeah, we'll have to see, man. It's kind of a middling. It wasn't a lightning debate, but then again, it was free. Mostly Trump was speaking, mostly extempore, which was great. I enjoyed it. So we'll be back soon. Moniker. So I'm going to check out that MH370 stuff, and then if he's made a film or something, that'd be really cool. Maybe something we could watch, or I could put together a little thread and could go through it on the next stream. So watch out for that, because yeah, I do remember the space-time thing, so I'd really like to see what that's all about. All right, everyone. Love you all, and let's spread it.
We will continue to support Ukraine becoming a NATO member.
Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches in black masses. Evil minds that blood destruction, sorcerer of death's destruction.
We will stand up every day and every way in favor of the export that the Ukrainian government has asked for.
Today I'm announcing more military assistance.
No more war pigs have the power. And God has struck the hour. Day of judgment God is calling. On the knees the war pigs crawling, begging mercy for their sins. Satan laughing spreads his wings.
Our role right from the outset of the Ukraine war should have been that of a peacemaker.
We want you to be the super spreaders of peace.